Assignment 31. Objects in motion. Materials: 3 washers, 3 strings, scissors, tape. Procedure: cut each string to a different length, short, medium, long. Tie a washer to one end of string and tape other end to table. Bring washer up to desk height and drop. Record number of strings. Result: Dari string long, 16. Twig's string medium, 23. Natalie string short. Today was the first day back in school after break, and Mr. Neely seemed determined to pump up our energy. If we thought Mr. Neely loved dead frogs and magnets, we experienced a whole new level of Neely love today. We walked into class to see hashtag Newton in Motion written in giant letters on the whiteboard. A weird YouTube song called Objects in Motion blasted on the speaker. Even Suck Uppies Michaela was shocked into silence. Across the room, Twig started playing air guitar and rocking out to Mr. Neely's nerdy music, and Dari joined in and played the air piano, because I guess the piano was the coolest instrument Dari could think of. Everyone stared, especially at Dari, because he was usually so serious in class, and I felt half embarrassed and half proud, because I had the weirdest friends in the 7th grade. Mr. Neely clapped along, beaming at their jam sesh, and when the music ended, he introduced our experiment of the day: washer pendulums. Dari, Twig, and I set up our table in the back, and Dari started telling us about his trip to India while we worked. Dari, of course, could finish his pendulum while he told his stories, but Twig and I kind of gave up working and listened to him talk about his brothers who tried to teach him to skateboard. As Dari spoke, I started to think about my own family, which meant thinking about Mom. And then I thought about the egg drop in a few days and how important it was. I started feeling a little head spinny. "Oh, by the way, guys," Dari said, looking at me as if he'd read my mind. Or maybe he just noticed I was distracted. I was working on Smegs a little, and I added just a few tweaks. We didn't test it from the height it'll actually be dropped from, so I adjusted the angles a bit. "That's great, Dari," Twig said, and then cleared her throat to glance over at me. She'd been mostly normal since our conversation on Christmas, but she always looked a little nervous when the competition came up. "Tweaks?" I asked. The spinning feeling you got worse. "They aren't a big deal," Dari reassured me. "You won't even notice, but they should help the egg survive impact." "We'll win this thing," Twig said, a little too intensely. Dari knows what he's doing. Dari looked between the two of us, trying to figure out what we weren't saying. But I was saved by Mr. Neely clapping his hands and announcing, "5 more minutes, class." Dari jumped a little and looked down at our unfinished pendulums in horror. I don't think he was used to getting distracted in class. He worked fast to finish all 3 pendulums. "Well done, us," Twig said. She picked up her washer and dropped it. We watched it swing back and forth, as if we were getting hypnotized. 23 swings, Twig announced when the pendulum stopped, and we all paused to record the number. Then came Dari's turn, with a total of 16 swings. And here, just to prove I learned something today, is the scientific concept of the pendulum. Once an object is in motion, it either transfers its energy to another object or keeps moving for all of eternity, based on the laws of physics. If our pendulum was placed in a vacuum, it would never stop swinging back and forth, back and forth. The problem with Earth is there's gravity and atmosphere, and all that other sticky, tricky Earth stuff that slows the pendulum down until it stops. So basically, nothing works as well in real life as in theory. Class ended before we had time to test my pendulum. Dari gasped in horror and said, "I'll have to run this experiment at home," while Twig said, "We'll have to make something up." "Sorry, guys," I said, even though I wasn't really sorry, and secretly, as Twig and Dari were cleaning up and getting back to their desks, I started my pendulum swinging fast on a short string. It looked wild, frenzied, like it wasn't sure which way to go. Forward and backward, and before it could slow down, I clamped my hand over the washer. I didn't care if I couldn't record the swings. I didn't want it to see it stop. Pump up our kinetic energy, that is. Do you think Isaac Newton would be proud or alarmed that his famous laws have been turned into a hashtag? Washers, noun, possibly scientific teacher's favorite thing in the world. A story about skateboarding sounds cool and everything, until you remember it's Dari, because of course he managed to make it nerdy by relating it back to science and talking about momentum and stuff. Step 7, results. All your hard work has paid off. Now reap your rewards. Record the results of your experiments. Remember, there are no losers in hashtag science, hashtag life. January 13th, assignment 32. Fly little Smegs. On the morning of the egg drop competition, while Dad prepared for his afternoon work sessions, I stood outside his and Mom's bedroom. I almost went in, but I did not. and Mom did not come out. More than ever, I knew how important this competition was, and I knew we had to win. I wanted to go inside, tell her what a big day this was. I wanted to make her understand and make her feel, but I couldn't get my hand to turn the knob. Dad came out of his office and found me standing in front of their bedroom door. "Natalie," he said, ready to launch into some therapist talk. But I was pointing at the clock and interrupted him. "We're going to be late," and went to wait for him in the car. We finally got going. He swung by to pick up Twig, who burst into the back seat of the car and greeted us. "We're going to kick butt." Dad glanced at her in the rearview mirror, probably deciding whether or not to scold her for language. But then she leaned forward toward the passenger seat so her breath tickled my ear. "I promise you," she said in an almost whisper, "we're going to win this. I can feel it." At her words, my stomach twisted in excitement, because as much as I was still trying to manage my expectations, I couldn't help it. We were going to win. I could feel it, too, in the air around us. We finally got to the competition, and I didn't know if I was expecting some grand ballroom or whatever. But the egg drop was hosted at an old three-story building. The second and third floors had a collection of random businesses, but the entire bottom floor used to be a library. Now it's apparently used to host community science events. Dad parked, and Twig and I looked up at the roof, where Smegs would be put to the test. "I'm so proud of you two," Dad said, and I felt almost guilty for the first time because Dad had no idea why I was really doing this. I tried not to think about it, and the three of us went inside. "This place stinks," Twig said. "It smells like old people and wet carpet, but stronger, like 50 old people and piles of wet carpet." "Ew," I said. "Yeah," Twig grinned, pleased with their description. Dad put a hand on each of our shoulders and said, "It's not that bad." But he was frowning as he said it. "Okay, young Jin," Twig said, and Dad's frown deepened. The entire floor was still set up like a library, with rows and rows of shelves, but they were empty, and when we spoke, our words echoed along the concrete floors, vibrating against the ghosts of old books. The room was already packed with kids and their parents, and I realized I never thought about the other teams. I figured once we had a good egg, uh, that'd be it, and the money would be ours. Nervousness bubbled up my stomach, and I buried my hands in my coat pockets and stuffed that worry back down. A lone microphone stand was propped up in a corner of the room, but we weren't given any instructions and nobody seemed to be in charge. The abandoned library felt too loud and too hot. Dari was supposed to be there already, and the minutes kept ticking by, and fluttery panic boomed in my chest. I shouldn't have let him keep Schmegs, but he wanted to hang on to it, and I hadn't said no. And now, if he didn't show up, we wouldn't be able to participate, and I couldn't win the money. And the doors opened, and Dari walked in with both of his parents behind him. "It smells weird in here," Dari said when he reached us. So, of course, Twig gave him the same description she'd given me, word for word. They launched into a discussion about why the room smelled like old people and wet carpet when there was, in fact, no carpet in the room. But I cut them off. "Did you bring Schmegs?" Obviously, Dari did, because Dari's smart, and forgetting the egg drop competition would be a not-so-smart move. But the question got them back on track. "I made a few more tweaks last night," Dari said. "I reasoned that tightening the inner angles would allow the egg to handle a bigger impact." I wish Dari had stopped making these tweaks, but I told myself to breathe. I mean, Twig was right. He was the smartest kid in our class. He probably knew what he was doing. Within 15 minutes, so many people had shown up that the room got hotter and more humid and even smellier. Mr. Neely arrived and waved his arms when he saw us, weaving in and out of other teams as he made his way over. "What an exciting day," he said to us, after he'd shaken hands and introduced himself to Dad in the chorus. "We're going to win," Twig informed him. "Of course you are. You're my scientific explorers," he said. I couldn't tell if he was serious or not. "I'm the head sheriff, and Dari's the mission analyst," Twig continued matter-of-factly, "and I wish she would stop. Those titles were just a joke, after all." Mr. Neely grinned. "Well, of course. Every team needs a head sheriff and a mission analyst. Natalie's the team captain," Twig said. Mr. Neely beamed at me, and Dad reached over and squeezed my shoulder, and I just wanted to disappear. "I'm glad to see you're still taking charge, Natalie," Mr. Neely said. And then, to our parents, "These three are my top students." That definitely wasn't true, but it was nice of him to say. He talked with our parents for a bit about how he left his pharmaceutical research job to teach. When he went to talk to the other science teachers, I watched him interact with them. He was still his awkward self, but he wasn't ours anymore. It was weird, and all of a sudden I felt angry, like he was supposed to be our teacher, and that was it. And now he was this person with friends and a past in pharma something, whatever. He was living a double life, and maybe the Mr. Neely we knew wasn't completely real. Then I realized I was being ridiculous. so I took a few breaths and tried to calm down. Eventually, a tall woman with glasses stepped up to the microphone. Finally, somebody was in charge and giving us direction. Welcome, young scientific minds, to Lancaster. My name is Charlene. Charlene looked like Doris, only 10 years older and a twinge more southern, and for some reason the comparison made me itchy with discomfort. I know how hard you all worked on your egg drop, she continued, and I want to tell you, first and foremost, you're all winners. Dari nodded along, but Twig looked at me and rolled her eyes because this Charlene woman was being a Mr. Neely. She pointed to her chest and then mine and whispered, mouthed, winners. Charlene went on to introduce the other 5 judges, but I was too busy eyeing the competition to pay attention. Most were uninspired, inverted egg cartons. Ours was definitely one of the best designs. I felt better seeing everyone else's eggs, and when Charlene and the other judges started setting up, Twig, Dari, and I abandoned our parents and walked around the room to get a closer look. You did a really nice job with the tweaks, Dari, Twig said, admiring the contraption in Dari's hand. Dari blushed. Thanks, but you're the one who had the great idea for Schmegs. I sighed. I couldn't help it. And then they both turned red, and all 3 of us kind of wanted to disappear for a few seconds. As we made a lap around the library, a pair of red-headed twin boys stopped us. What a creative design, the first one said. They were dressed in matching sweaters stitched with the Valley Hope crest, and it took me a moment to realize they were talking to us. I would have never have considered marshmallows, the second twin continued. How cute. They spoke in that fancy Valley Hope way, enunciating their consonants and rounding their vowels, and it was hard to tell whether they were sincere or sarcastic. Thank you, Doris said, polite and reflex. Clever design yourself. I glanced down at the contraption in the first boy's hands, and my heart seized up and settled in my throat. They had cushioned the egg in cotton balls and placed it into a Ziploc baggie full of Lucky Charms cereal. Twig gave Dari a look of disappointment and stepped forward. Cereal's a stupid idea, she said. Smegs is going to beat your egg. The first twin said, Smegs, and the second stiffened and said, may the best egg win, before they took their cereal and walked away. Twig turned to Dari and said, Did you see that? Did you see that? As if maybe he could have missed the entire exchange. Dari mumbled a response, but I tugged on her hand. Twig, let it go, I said. She frowned, but for once she actually listened. To be honest, I'd forgotten about Mom's cereal idea until that moment. Or, if I hadn't forgotten, I'd at least buried it deep with all the things I wouldn't say. And I stood there for a few minutes, watching Twig ramble on without really hearing her. I didn't know what our egg dropper would have looked like if Mom had helped us, if she had been happy and real and full of experiments. But I guess I wouldn't have been at this competition at all if that were the case. I tried to put the cereal out of my mind. Smegs would win, and that would matter in the end. The judges passed around a bowl for drawing out numbers, and as team captain I took a slip, number 16. The 1 and 6 still smelled like Sharpie, and I folded it in a tiny square in my palm. Out of the 20 teams, we'd be one of the last to go. The drop would happen off the roof into a designated spot in the parking lot. So after drawing our numbers, we all shuffled into our winter coats, re-wrapping and bundling and buttoning until we were standing outside in the parking lot, breathing hot air into our mittened hands. The judges took our eggs up to the top of the building, except for a young curly-haired judge with a name tag that read Sean. He stayed below to announce the status of dropped eggs, cracked or not cracked. A few contestants tried to make conversation with him, but I tuned them out, bouncing on the balls of my feet, battling the cold in my nerves. We'll be fine, Twig said, calm as could be. This is much higher than our test at my house. Dari unclenched his hands, buzzing with nervous energy. Our egg is strong, Twig said, as Charlene announced the first egg and dropped it off the edge of the roof. It broke, and I let out a sigh of relief. With so many contestants, the drops took a while, interspersed only occasionally with the cheers from a surviving team. Later, the judges would score the surviving eggs based on durability and bounce factor and aerodynamic design. We survived, too. We'd survived, too. I just knew it. Somewhere along the way, Twig slipped into announcer mode, whispering observations into Dari and my ears. She spoke in a low voice and said stuff like, the blondes are tense with anticipation. Will their bubble-wrapped egg make it past the drop of doom? The crowd hold its breath. Hold your breath, guys. And wait for it. Our fearless Charlene is about to drop the egg, and oh, close, but no cigar. This is a tough break for our blondes. Literally. The kids around us turned and glared, and eventually some random parent came up and told us to please be quiet, which was embarrassing for Dari and me, but of course Twig didn't mind at all. Listening to Twig's commentary, I could get through most of the round without too much anxiety. But by the 13th egg, none of us spoke, Instead, the three of us held our hands with number 16 pressed between Twig and me. And it wasn't weird or embarrassing. This abandoned parking lot was like an alternate universe where everyone really cared about raw eggs, and holding hands was a totally acceptable thing to do. When Charlene got to our number, I looked over at Dad and he gave me a big, goofy thumbs up. Twig squeezed my hand so hard I was pretty sure all my bones shattered. In that moment when everything stood still and the outcome was unknown to all of us, we were hopeful. I got this huge surge of love from my dad and Twig and Dari, from Mr. Neely and even Dari's parents and all those people who were making life so much better. I wanted to hug each one of them, but I didn't want to get sappy either. I missed Mom, of course, but the weird part was that I didn't feel angry or sad or uncomfortable about missing her, like I usually did. Instead, I felt hopeful, partially because winning seemed so inevitable and I had big plans for that money, but also because if my world could be so happy just because of a silly little egg contest and the fate of an egg, then I knew Mom's world could be happy again too. She would be okay because we would win and I would save her. Charlene dropped our egg. My heart burst into super panic mode, and in my head I said, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay. But this was different from dropping the egg with Twig and Dari. Then it had been only us, and we had been experimenting. Now everything was out of our control. My heartbeat thudded in my ears, and Smegs hit the ground. The twigs went flying. Bits of marshmallow exploded, and a cloud of glitter burst in the air. We didn't need to wait for Sean's announcement. The sound it made was enough. That cracking, crunching noise was the loudest sound I've ever heard in my whole life. I looked at my friends because I didn't want to look at the puddle of yellow growing bigger and bigger around our egg. The broken sticks were like broken bones. Dari was shaking his head back and forth, like he didn't even know what he was doing. But Twig was still. The glitter was supposed to be a surprise, she murmured, in a voice far too quiet for Twig. Still, she did not move, and I had the scary thought that maybe she would never move again. Dad and Dari's parents came up to us, and Dad put his hand on my shoulder. Do you want to go? Twig answered for me. Yeah, we don't need to see those stupid Valley Hope kids win. She was shaking with fury and disappointment, so I guess she was moving again, but not in the way I wanted her to. Wait, I said. I want to wait. One summer day, a rare one when wasn't working, Mom had taken me to the local pool. We'd been talking about sound waves, and to demonstrate the difference in water, she concocted an experiment. Ready? She'd asked, as we both hung onto the edge of the pool. And I said, ready. And we'd slipped under the water. She said a sentence, and the water molecules twisted and morphed with the sound. And when we both emerged, I had to guess what she'd said, had to find meaning in the garbled underwater language. That was how my words sounded to me at this moment. Okay, Dad said, we'll wait. His hands hadn't left my shoulder, and he squeezed hard, as if to remind me I was still there. Around me, Twig and Dari and Mr. and Mrs. Kapoor were speaking, but I couldn't quite hear them. Mrs. Kapoor knelt next to Dari, and her yellow sari, the color of bright, fresh yolk, peeked out from underneath her long down jacket. Charlene was somehow still carrying on with the competition. I watched another egg drop, another egg broke. I counted. 17, 18, 19. Dad kept holding onto my shoulder, and I kept counting, and Dari said in my ear, it's always good to see the results. I nodded vaguely, even though I wasn't really seeing. I was waiting, and then it was the Valley Hope twins' turn. I couldn't see the cereal all the way up the roof. I could only see their Ziploc bag. My feet and hands were completely numb with cold, but I didn't bother trying to warm them up. Charlene dropped the cereal egg, and this time there was no crack, only a crunch of Lucky Charms. I couldn't breathe. I was back underwater. I thought I should have listened to Mom. What? Dari asked, and I realized I'd spoken that out loud. Sean stepped forward to inspect the egg, and my head rang with, Mom would be so disappointed in me. But then he gave a thumbs down. Cracked. The egg was broken. The egg had a tiny fracture, hardly noticeable, but its life was oozing out, just like all the other broken eggs. So Mom was wrong, and that was worse. Yes, Twig shouted, and the crowd turned around and glared at her. Twig lowered her voice, but only a little. I told them cereal was a stupid idea. The crowd started rustling around us, and Sean announced that anybody who wanted to stay for the final deliberation could wait inside the library. I heard myself say, we can leave now. All of us kind of adjusted and readjusted our clothes, saying goodbyes, all long and drawn out, because we wanted to leave, but we weren't ready to go. Mr. Neely came up and gave us hugs and tried to act happy, even though we obviously weren't. I'm so glad you guys participated, he said, and I wanted to cry the word participate, as if it were all we were capable of. I have to say, your design is my favorite, he winked. So creative and inventive. What Charlene said earlier was true. You three are winners, no matter what. You worked so hard and you've learned so much about the scientific process. I'm proud to be your teacher. Dari blushed and mumbled a thanks, and Twig stared up at Mr. Neely in shock, because I don't think she's used to praise from a teacher. Beneath all the numbness, anger sparked inside me, heating inside my chest, because Mr. Neely had no idea. He stood there, talking about the scientific process as if that mattered, as if the stupid science experiment had anything to do with real life. Let's go, I said, and turned to walk away without waiting for a response. Dad was probably horrified by my rudeness. I was sort of horrified too, but I had to get away. Twig and Dari ran after me, and Twig grabbed my arm. This can't be it, though. Operation Ink can't be over. I shrugged. I knew the sadness would come later, but at that moment, I was upset and a little bit nauseated. Anger on an empty stomach. Dari got quiet too, and he whispered, We'll still be friends, right? After this? Twig looked like she'd cry, and we were all not okay. Of course we will, she said, first to Dari, staring straight at him, and then she turned to me, her eyes lit with a fire deeper and bolder than I'd seen in her. Of course we will. She hugged me and I hugged her back, holding on tight. I felt kind of bad because I knew Dari felt awkward and out of place, but I couldn't stop hugging her. Twig was my best friend and I needed her. When we pulled away, her eyes were fierce. Operation Orchard is still on. We can fix things, she said. I sighed and shook my head. It's over, Twig, I said. I couldn't think about the orchid. I couldn't even look at her. I felt the sadness growing inside of me, and if I thought about what this meant, the sadness would take root and never leave. Dari didn't ask, but he looked at us. Questions and half answers danced in his eyes. But, Twig said. I cut her off. It was a stupid idea anyway, I said. I brushed past her and got in the car, slamming the door in her face. Do you think there's any significance to this? Like, move over books, science is the future? Although Twig isn't really capable of whispering, being quiet isn't her strong suit. Not literally move, never move, obviously, but never move again in the way of Twig. Like maybe she would not be not Twig from now on, like Mom was not Mom. I don't know. I was in super panic mode.